Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into an incredibly sensitive and fast-moving diplomatic rift between the US and India. And look, this isn't just about lines on a map. We're talking about a literal collision between military operations and civilian maritime safety. We're going to examine the recent naval strike on the oil tanker Settebello out in the Gulf of Oman. It's an incident that has absolutely sent shockwaves right through Washington and New Delhi. So based on the reports, we're going to break down exactly what went down, the immediate diplomatic fallout, and what this actually means for the incredibly fragile state of global trade routes right now.
Put yourself in the shoes of an Indian foreign policy advisor for a second. A crisis dossier just landed on your desk about a military strike on a commercial ship, and your number one priority? The safety of your citizens. This quote from External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, where he flat out tells U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio that lethal actions against commercial shipping are not justified, really sets the stage here. I mean, it perfectly captures the sheer diplomatic friction this event has sparked. It's a very direct, forceful message from one major global partner to another, signaling a massive diplomatic challenge that they have to manage immediately.
To really grasp the weight of Minister Jaishankar's words, we've got to look past the high-level strategy and focus on the concrete reality on the water. We're tracking the Palau-flagged oil tanker, the Settebello, navigating the Gulf of Oman. Because, while all this geopolitics is being debated in capital cities, the immediate impact is felt by the actual seafarers working on these massive ships. Behind every international incident like this, there is a very real, very immediate human cost that just cannot be ignored when diplomats sit down at the table.
And the demographics aboard the Settebello completely explain the urgency coming out of New Delhi. Out of a 28-person crew, a staggering 24 members were Indian nationals. The other 4 were a mix, 2 Pakistanis, 1 Ukrainian, and 1 Russian. When a foreign military uses lethal force against a commercial vessel, the country with the most citizens on board is instantly thrown into crisis management mode. This demographic reality, it's the absolute driving force behind India's swift and unyielding response.
And sadly, we have to pause on this number 3. Right after the U.S. military strike, 3 crew members were reported missing. Tragically, Indian authorities later confirmed that these 3 Indian seafarers were found dead. The Ministry of External Affairs called this a tragic and entirely avoidable loss of life. It's this specific number that took the incident from a really tense maritime encounter and turned it into a fatal tragedy, which fundamentally shifted the tone of every diplomatic conversation that followed.
Okay, so let's dive into the sequence of events. To make sense of the competing narratives, we need to objectively deconstruct the tactical encounter itself. What actually happened in the Gulf of Oman that led to such a catastrophic outcome? We have the step-by-step reports directly from U.S. Central Command, which gives us a really clear picture of how what started as a routine interdiction escalated into the use of lethal force.
Let's walk through the timeline based on the sources. Step 1. U.S. naval forces issue instructions to the Settebello. Now, according to U.S. Central Command, American forces targeted the tanker because they believed it was trying to transport oil from Iran, which violates an ongoing American blockade. Step 2. The Settebello allegedly fails to comply with those directions. Then, Step 3 is where things peak. A U.S. aircraft fires on the vessel, effectively disabling it. And finally, Step 4. In the aftermath, 21 Indian sailors were rescued while the search for the missing ended in the tragic discovery we just talked about.
As you'd expect, as soon as the news broke and the casualties were confirmed, the political reaction was incredibly fast. India didn't wait around to express its frustration. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar got straight on the phone with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. But it didn't stop there. Over in New Delhi, the U.S. Chargé d'Affaires, Jason Meeks, was formally summoned to the Ministry of External Affairs. Now, if you're a foreign policy advisor, you know that summoning a top diplomat is a highly serious, formal way for a host country to lodge a strong protest. The MEA made it crystal clear to Meeks that they expect U.S. forces to take absolutely every necessary measure to prevent the loss of civilian life.
What's really fascinating here is that we're essentially looking at a collision of 2 completely different geopolitical paradigms. On one side, from a military operational view, U.S. CENTCOM is actively enforcing an American blockade. They're stopping illegal Iranian oil transport and dealing with a vessel that they say showed repeated noncompliance. On the flip side, from a civilian protection standpoint, the Indian MEA is emphasizing that the Settebello was a commercial civilian vessel doing commercial things. To them, using lethal force was deadly, disproportionate, and totally unacceptable. It's 2 entirely different frameworks for evaluating the exact same event.
But an incident like the Settebello strike doesn't happen in a vacuum. A bilateral dispute over a disabled ship and 3 tragic deaths very quickly ripples outwards, forcing us to broaden our lens. This isolated maritime strike
is actually just a symptom of a much wider macro-geopolitical issue gripping the region right now, one that honestly threatens the entire architecture of global trade.
The Ministry of External Affairs argues that this tragedy is a direct consequence of the broader conflict in the Middle East. The ongoing crisis in West Asia has led to all these competing maritime restrictions imposed by different state and non-state actors. And because these blockades are being actively and clearly lethally enforced, we're seeing a massive disruption of international commercial shipping. Essentially, regular civilian shipping lanes are being turned into highly militarized, deadly zones. Commercial seafarers are just getting caught in the crossfire of geopolitical conflicts that they have absolutely nothing to do with.
Which brings us to India's ultimate diplomatic position. They are reiterating their call for immediate de-escalation. This is way bigger than a single tanker now. India is stressing that attacks on shipping in the region are deeply worrisome and highly destabilizing. This whole crisis perfectly highlights why broader regional stability is so urgently needed. Because without de-escalation, the safety and survival of international maritime commerce is just hanging by a thread during an incredibly volatile time for international relations.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. As regional conflicts continue to escalate and these competing blockades tighten their grip, how can international maritime commerce survive in increasingly militarized waters? I mean, can civilian ships continue to supply the world when the constant threat of lethal military force is hanging over their routes? It's a complex, thorny problem with absolutely no easy answers. But understanding the geopolitical dynamics at play, just like we've seen through the Settebello incident, well, that's the crucial first step. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.